say your name and then where are you from?
Thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. Really appreciate it. My name's Allie. I just graduated from Harvard Law School. You raised a very powerful similarity between our two nations, that we are both nations of immigrants. And you raised a lot of issues about the sort of challenges that diversity can bring in terms of governance. And I wanted to explore basically your ideas for New Zionism. As an American, the idea of ethnic statehood is very foreign and difficult to understand. So I guess like kind of two parts. I know that there are some people who would find Zionism kind of inherently alienating as well. So I guess like to maybe like contextualize like what you might mean by Zionism, and also probing a bit deeper, even within the Jewish community, there's also a lot of diversity. Many Jews are, like very Orthodox, very religious, many are very secular.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of diversity as well. And I think both of our nations right now are kind of facing a bit of a crisis of identity. So your vision for New Zionism, what does that mean? What is the nature of Jewishness that you're trying to, I guess, like forge for Israel? And how essential is ethnicity to be central to this new idea that Israel is going to become?
Thank you so much for your question. This is probably one of the things that I'm tackling with myself on a daily basis. How do you, with all these ethnicities here, especially we have new immigrants coming from Africa, which is, it also takes a toll on this very, very difficult question. I'm very, very Jewish. I can tell you something interesting. I'm Jewish by choice. And the reason for it is not because I wasn't born Jewish. I was born Jewish. But from my perspective, to be Jewish is also a choice. It's a matter of choice. And it's not that I practice. I'm secular, what would be considered secular. My children know they're Jewish. Obviously, the Jewish holidays are a thing. But, it's also a cultural thing. That's the thing about Judaism. And that's the fascinating thing that you can see in America, that, being Jewish is not just a religion. It's also a matter of culture. It's a matter of congregation. It's a matter of getting together. I wouldn't deny the fact that there is something kind of leaving out thing in Judaism. It's difficult to become Jewish. It's not something that our rabbis, think that it should be easy. I would probably make it easier than they would. I love a good joiner, right? So if anybody wants to join this fascinating religion, all the more you're welcome. Please come on board. But it does poses a lot of questions. And that's the thing that I was referring to earlier, that starting off as a melting pot in Israel, as in America, or any society of immigrants, at one point creates a whole new generation of questions and problems. And from my perspective, it's very interesting to see the community that came from the old Soviet Union, how they are evolving. It's interesting. I was 20 years old when they came over, so I've had a chance to see. And it's very interesting. At one point, when they started off, they didn't understand democracy. So the main thing for them was to vote against the reigning government. And then they became very, very right-wing, because force is something that was very, very important to people who came from the old Soviet Union, because that's how they were raised culturally. And obviously, I'm making a very, very dangerous generalization, just giving you an idea. Nowadays, you can see a whole new generation being raised to the left. It's interesting because they find a lot more solutions from their perspective, obviously, in the left. I always say in Israel, it's much easier to be right-wing, Every terror attack that you can see, a very close friend of mine, two close friends of mine one of them lost their niece, one of them lost their son, just in recent terror attacks. So it's very easy to be right-wing, in Israel, but for me, it's also a choice of the future. So coming back to your question, Israel needs to remain a Jewish nation. We don't have another place. We don't have another place. And even if it poses challenges on the democratic question, which is also a very, very crucial leg, and equality, which is very, very important. We need to deal with that step by step until, it's very difficult to create a society which we're all proud of. It's a challenging thing. Looking at America, just to think that going 50 years back, black people couldn't sit, in the front of the bus, couldn't go to the same schools as white people. Can you imagine the changes that we've been going through? It always makes me think, but it also always makes me hopeful. Because America has already had a black man as its president. About the women question, that's a whole different question when it comes to America and Israel, by the way. Because we have already had a woman prime minister as early as the 1970s. When are we going to have another woman prime minister next, So, as difficult as this question is, we need to, we need to see what we do about it. And I'm being very thankful. But, Israel, from my perspective, will never be a society of its citizens, or a country of its citizens, okay? It would always be a Jewish nation trying to maintain the equality for all minorities that are living here. And that would always pose challenges. Thank you. Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Victor. I'm from Brazil, from the Jewish community in Brazil, and I'm currently in the U.S. studying law.
Where? Where are you?
In the U.S.,
Ah.
Syracuse, New York.
Okay.
Ayelet student. As a former volunteer in a kibbutz, you were talking about socialist. Your father was.
Which kibbutz?
Gan Shmuel.
Ah.
A long time ago, when I had hair. Well.
I wanted to say when it was a kibbutz, but it's Gan Shmuel is a good example of a kibbutz that stayed a kibbutz.
That's my question, by the way. You think there is still room in Israel for kibbutzim and moshavim as we knew it in the past, the utopic socialism, or there is no room whatsoever for that?
Nothing is as we knew it. Let me start out by saying that. It's interesting. There is positive immigration into kibbutzim.
Really?
They are renewing themselves. Do you know what kibbutzim are? It's an amazing way of living, by the way. Cooperative, and that's the fascinating thing. That's what I wanted to say. The enhanced capitalist world has created a new opportunity for the cooperative concept, because you can see what happens with cooperatives around the world. You see urban cooperatives, you see financial cooperatives, you see consumer cooperatives. It's amazing what's happening. So in the past 5 years, you have had positive immigration into kibbutzim. Unfortunately, a lot of it has happened due to the fact that the cost of living in Israel has become a lot higher. And kibbutzim is a wonderful forum to raise your children. Ages and ages ago, it wasn't such a great way to raise, because when the pioneers were here, they decided the children should not be sleeping with their parents in the same house. So they had a separate house, and they would see their parents for about 2 or 3 hours a day, which nowadays we know truly the price was too high. So that has changed. So a lot of things are changing, but the wonderful thing to see is that communal gatherings and communal dining is still a custom. And you would go to kibbutzim and you would see for lunch, for dinner, for Shabbat, you would see people dining together. So from my perspective, it's taking a new form. There's innovation even in socialism. And you can see it even worldwide. So interestingly enough, yeah, it does have still a chance. Yeah. I'm torn apart, Benjamin. You need to help me because I'll try right and left. Okay, so you.
I'm Steven. I'm from Massachusetts, but I'm living in Naples.
I'm the only Israeli who knows how to say Massachusetts properly. I've read it 3 times. Massachusetts.
So yeah, I'm from Massachusetts, but I'm living in Naples, Italy, while I'm serving in the Navy. So for the next 3 years, I'll be living there. My question for you is kind of about military service, and you talked about these social divisions within the Israeli society, and I wonder, what do you think does the draft and the mandatory military service help create unity and cohesion to address some of that? But it seems like it doesn't solve the problem because you still have all these divisions. But do you think it helps, and how so?
First of all, the IDF is amazing. It's an amazing place. And interestingly enough, I spoke about when I was telling my husband this morning, it's Valentine's Day in Israel today, so it was very nice to him this morning. And we were speaking about the lecture, and I was telling him I was going to meet you, and he was saying something very true. 20 years ago, when he was a young officer, the Army has understood its social toll. There's a social task that goes along with the fact that there's a draft in Israel. Because when you're 18 and you're going to the Armored Corps, or you're going to artillery, or you're going to anywhere else, infantry, you have people coming from the south, from the center, from the north. Israel is very, very small, but the differences are there. You would have Jews, you would have Bedouins, you would have Druze. And you would have men and women in a country where religion takes place, even in a place like the Army. So I think the Army has a crucial task, not only in forming our social identity and our social future. We live next to each other, and unfortunately, we die next to each other. And it creates values, morals, and we have had to deal with a moral question this past year on a daily basis because of a certain incident that happened in Israel that was very, very unfortunate. And the soldier is going into prison because the ethics and code of conduct in the IDF is very, very crucial, not only to the IDF, but to the Israeli society as a whole, because of the fact that we are living next to the Palestinians and we have not been able to separate from them up until now. And that poses a whole world of dilemmas, day-to-day dilemmas, day-to-day conflict, day-to-day encounters that pose, that puts 18-year-olds in life and death dilemmas. So on the one hand, it has a crucial, it kind of creates the social backbone or contributes to the social backbone. On the other hand, obviously, to create equality, that's a very challenging thing. The Army has taken a social place in that respect, bringing on children less fortunate into the Army and giving them a sense of value, which is amazing. Because on the one hand, you wouldn't want your children to be getting their opportunity by holding a rifle, right? That's what you would think. Normally that's what you would think. But the IDF I think is unique in that respect. Even when it comes to questions of LGBT, and we have commanders that are LGBT, and we are, as I said, a Jewish country, no separation of state or religion. So even nowadays, I can tell you, when women are being drafted to more combat units, there's a new world of questions of how is the day-to-day encounter between men and women going to be dealt with. We have women now joining the Armored Corps. How do you deal with a woman in a tank? We've always had men in tank. I have a private man in a tank. But how do you deal with that? And it's interesting. It's not the ultra-Orthodox, because the ultra-Orthodox, most of them are not being drafted. But rather the ultra-religious, who are a very strong part of the IDF, who are bringing this question very strongly into our day-to-day activity, even in the Knesset. So the IDF is amazing. A lot of its task is social, and it's very, very challenging. It's very challenging.
This will be the
Enjoy
last,
Naples.
This will be the last question.
Okay. I'm sorry that my answers are long. Israel does not give a chance for short answers.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm from University of Pennsylvania. On the topic of democracy and the challenge in Israel, I was hoping you could speak to the expulsion of Al Jazeera that's going on right now.
The question of incitement when it comes to social media and media in the Palestinian street is a very difficult question. Incitement there is unbearable. It creates, as I said, it's easier to be right-wing in Israel a lot of the time, okay? I choose to be, the same as I choose to be Jewish, even though I was born Jewish. I choose to be a left-wing, or I would say a center-left, okay? We have a prime minister who shares a lot of similarities with a certain American president when it comes to the press. And from my perspective, obviously, that's unfortunate because I think that people are very intelligent, have the ability to filterize and, information. Social media would bring it onto you anyway, so why close Al Jazeera in Israel? On the other hand, we need to do something about the incitement in the Palestinian Authority. We need to do something about the incitement in the Arab world when it comes to Israel. We are not there to kill. Someone misunderstand this. When you meet Israelis, I hope that your first impression is not that we are looking how we can, kill a Palestinian. God help us, God forbid. When we have to go to combat, like we have had to go in the past few years in Gaza, we have missiles over our heads. I can tell you something personal. My first childhood memory is the siren of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. My father taking me on his shoulders to the shelter and then disappearing for 4 months to the Golan Heights. When he came back, I didn't recognize him. He had a beard and his glasses broke. He said that was one of the most difficult moments of his life because I didn't recognize him. I didn't give him a hug. And all he thought about when he was in the Golan Heights was I was going to see me and going to get a hug. My twins' first childhood memory, well, all my children, by the way, first memory is a siren. Period. That's their first childhood memory of rockets being shot over from Gaza. We got out of Gaza to give them a chance. We didn't get out of Gaza not to give them a chance. What did they do without opportunity? What did they do without opportunity? Nothing. It's amazing to look at Palestinians. They know the Jewish and Israeli history better than anyone. The one thing they did not take from us was crucial to stabilizing the Palestinian Authority, which I can tell you, Yitzhak Rabin did not render easily. It wasn't easy for him to sit with Arafat. But he wanted to give them a chance. And the one thing they didn't take from Zionism was the most important thing, is how do you create institutions? How do you take care of your people? All you have in Palestinian Authority, unfortunately, is corruption, corruption, corruption. Is nepotism and incitement and hatred. And I understand the hatred. I would like to separate from the Palestinians. Fact. That's what I want. I would want them to have a separate state. But they also have, I know that I'm always perceived and will always, God help us, always be perceived the strong one. That's okay. That's good. I'm not afraid of that kind of strength and force. Because the Jewish people, a lot of the time in history, weren't the strong ones. But on the other hand, looking at what is called the partner, I want to see how they raise their children. My children are raised on love of humanity, on universal values. They know, they don't learn to be afraid of Arabs. They know that I meet Arabs on a daily basis. My husband, we really had the pleasure. I always speak about my husband, but it's true because that's how we became a couple. He was working with his parents. I was working with Yitzhak Rabin. He was a part of the peace process. I was a part of the peace process. That's how we hit it off. We have the peace process to thank God for our children. That thing, by the way, to come out of the peace process. At least there's that. But the thing is, just to wrap up the question, is that I don't want a prime minister, I don't want a government that controls the media. But I'm also, also think of how do we stop this incitement? How we stop this hatred? How we raise children on both sides of the fence in a different way. I'm trying to do that. Eventually, I hope they will try to do that too. Thank you very much.